Hi there. I'm going to share a video of my sermon for the day. The readings are from Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, and then verses 13 to 25. And the gospel is from Luke chapter 9, verses 51 to 62. Feel free to pause the video and have a read of those and then start it up again. So we've heard from Paul's ancient letter to the Galatian church, and the Galatians were a nation who the Greeks and Romans saw as being uncivilized barbarians. They came over from the area that's now France and invaded Greece, and then they ended up settling in what's now Turkey. Later on, they were conquered by the Romans. So Greek and Roman people really looked down on them. They saw themselves as being civilized and educated and sophisticated. And they saw the Galatians as uneducated savages. And the Romans made all these statues of them, celebrating their defeat, depicting their warriors subjugated. And they put images of their subjugation on their coins as well, so that those coins and those statues, whenever they saw them, would remind them that they had been put down and they had been conquered, that they were less than fully human. When Paul writes to the Galatians, he's writing to a group of Galatians who have become Christians. And at the time that he writes the letter to them, there have been other Christians coming from Jerusalem, Christians from a Jewish background, who've been coming to them and saying that they have to adopt all of the Jewish practices from the Torah, that they have to follow all of those practices that make up the Jewish vision of a good life. And Paul is somebody who does that. Paul is somebody who follows the Torah. He's Jewish. He sees that as a good thing because that's part of his vision of the good life. But he tells the Galatians that following Jesus doesn't mean that they have to follow the Torah. They don't have to adopt another society's culture and way of life in order to follow Jesus. The focus is love, and it's loving conduct, loving behavior. And he says they need to steer away from behavior that undermines love by being selfish and using others for their own satisfaction. So they're free from having to learn a whole lot of new rules. And this isn't something that's entirely unique to the teachings of Jesus or Paul. It's in line with what the Rabbi Hillel said. Hillel said, "Don't do to others what is hateful to you." The rest is commentary. So it's saying that the rest is just examples that demonstrate what it means to love God and love our neighbour while also loving ourselves. Of course, it's not as simple as just doing that. We're part of a world where people are often hurting each other and loving only themselves or only loving people that are like them, their own nation or their own family. We're part of a world where we're often still being subjected to powers who want to rule over us. And Paul talks about our tendency to do harmful and dishonourable things that we don't want to do. And he talks about that as the flesh. When he talks about the flesh, he's not really talking about bodies, although it's related to bodies. What he's talking about is the aspect of humanity that's led by selfishness and nastiness, and is happy to devour others. It's happy to take advantage of others for our own sake, for our own satisfaction, for our own benefit. And it's happy to lash out at others when we're angry or when we're hurt. Paul is saying that they're free from that aspect of humanity and that we're free to instead offer love to the world. But we need to choose to live freely and to live lovingly, not to keep living like we're still under the control of our harmful and dishonourable and selfish and nasty tendencies. The basic goodness of God has been put in us at creation, and it's still there, but we need to choose it. We have example of that in the gospel reading. So Jesus and his friends are heading towards Jerusalem. And because we know the story already, we know that Jesus is not going to be welcome there. He's going to die at the hands of the authorities there. He's going to die at the hands of the powers that rule the world. And it was really normal for Jewish people to have to travel to Jerusalem because the Jewish temple was there. Lots of people had to travel on foot. If they had to travel a long distance, they would have to travel on foot. And it would mean that you'd have to depend on the hospitality of strangers because you're not going to get to your destination in one day a lot of the time. Because everybody needed to depend on the hospitality of strangers when they were traveling, it was considered really important to look after strangers who were traveling past your town or your home. Everybody knew that it was important to do that because they knew that they would have to depend on the same kind of hospitality when they were in a strange land and traveling. So Jesus is sending folks ahead to scout out and see where the rest of their group can stay on their way to Jerusalem. But the people of the town that see this group heading towards them, they turn them away. Because the fact that they're heading towards Jerusalem and that they can see that they're heading towards Jerusalem tells this town that they're enemies. The village is Samaritans. They're people who worshipped the same God as Jewish people, but they had their own temple where they believed they should be worshipping, and they wanted to keep worshipping in their own temple according to their own customs. The differences between Samaritans and Jewish people had led to war between the two peoples, and that explains why they wouldn't welcome Jesus and his group. Their nations have devoured each other in the past, and they want to prevent the chance of that happening again. Now Jesus and his friends have got a choice about how they're going to take the rejection. They could respond out of the basic goodness of human nature and respond lovingly by being patient and gracious, or they could respond out of the twisted and selfish and nasty tendency that Paul calls the flesh. James and John, followers of Jesus, they take offense at the rejection. In response to the snub, they want to resume hostilities. They want to call down fire from heaven, like Elijah did in their ancient stories. They want it to consume the village. Jesus says, no, that's not the way. There are other places they can stay. They don't need to force people to welcome them. And as they're walking towards Jerusalem, where Jesus is going to die, one of the disciples says, I'll go wherever you go. And Jesus wonders, do you really understand what that means? Do you understand that it means giving up what you might want? Do you understand that sometimes you won't be welcome and you won't have somewhere comfortable to rest? Do you understand that your society might not understand you? Do you understand that your family might not appreciate the things that you do in sharing love with the world? Do you understand that your life could be threatened? Many Christians have faced those fears. We might have experienced the disapproval of family because of our faith. We might have faced the reality of death. We might have experienced the loss of home. But we can be comforted by knowing that many saints who've gone before us have experienced those things as well. And even our Lord Jesus Christ knows those pains too. There's a sense that wherever we are, we'll always be not quite at home. Even though it might be in our nature to just try and fit in with what others want us to do, just to serve ourselves and our family, we're called to offer love to the world. And that's always going to make us stand out a bit because we're trying to live as part of a new society that's focused on sharing love with the world, not just trying to satisfy ourselves or preserve ourselves, whoever we consume on the way. It doesn't mean we're the only people who are doing that. But that's something that we're being called to do, and it's going to make us stand out. Our society might say, these people over here are our enemies, or those people over there are our enemies, or those people who our masters have chosen to bomb are our enemies. But our master is Jesus, and he's freed us so that we can live differently, not as slaves, but as ambassadors of a new society that God's creating, that's founded on this practice of sharing love with others.